I would like to start by thanking Nzinga Broussard, our president-elect, and Hazel Robinson, our treasurer, for pulling this program together, as well as Leonard Wantchekon, of course, for accepting our invitation. So yeah, round of applause to you all. And part of the President-elect committee was also Willeen Johnson, who's in the room with us, and Romy Tribble and Maisha Williams, who unfortunately cannot be here with us today. So the lecture, the Sir Arthur Lewis Lecture, was established by the National Economic Association to celebrate and recognize an economist who has produced seminal work in development, specifically economic development, and or made a significant contribution to the economic development through public service. And I'm sure, as you will hear in a moment from Nzinga, Leonard meets both these criteria and then some. So we are very glad that he accepted our invitation to speak today as the Sir Arthur Lewis Lecture. In terms of context, in case you're unaware, the National Economic Association was founded in 1969 as the Caucus of Black Economists to improve the lives of minorities in the economics profession. And we still carry that mission forward as we have very complex times in economics, but also in the United States and the world. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to our president-elect, Nzinga Broussard, who will introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be able to introduce this year's lecturer, Leonard Wantchekon. He's the James Madison Professor of Political Economy, Professor of Politics and International Affairs at Princeton University. He previously served as professor at New York University and at Yale University, and he holds a PhD in economics from Northwestern University. His research centers on political economy, development economics, and economic history, with regional focus on Africa and on substantive topics such as democracy and development, education and social mobility, the long-term social impact of slavery and colonial rule, and more recently, the legacy of the Ogoji, the female warriors of the pre-colonial kingdom of Dahomey, current-day Benin, featured in the Hollywood movie, The Woman King, where he served as the historical advisor of the movie. Wantchekon is the 2023 recipient of the Global Economy Prize, awarded every year by the Kiel Institute in Germany. He is also a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the Econometric Society, and a research affiliate at the National Bureau of Economic Research. He served as vice president of the American Political Science Association and is on the executive committee of the International Economic Association. And finally, Wantchekon is the founder and president of the African School of Economics, which opened in Benin in 2014 and provides first-class academic training to the continent's young economists. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Leonard Wantchekon.
Okay. Well, so thank you all for coming, and thanks Nzinga for such a generous introduction, and also for inviting me. I was counting the days, the hours, the minutes before this event, so I can't wait to get started. So today's speech or lecture is on state capacity, institutional experimentation and development. So the key point I'll be making is that beside labor and capital, social cohesion, social infrastructure is key to development and to state capacity. And what drives, what limits state capacity is political distortion. So finding ways to reduce political distortion, to reduce the extent to which politics come in the way of development is critical. And later on, I'm going to show how you can improve, you can experiment on institutions that can reduce distortion, strengthen state capacity, and improve the prospect of development. So I'm going to argue that change can be, should be incremental. We just need to find the best way, the best way to edit the existing institution to improve the prospect of development. So, there is a macro literature developing that focuses on total factor productivity and misallocation that argues that, in fact, much of the disparity in GDP per capita is at least 50% driven by total factor productivity. And this is referred to as social infrastructure development, which include social cohesion and governance. And at the heart of social cohesion, total factor productivity, at the heart of social infrastructure development is state capacity. So what is state capacity? State capacity is broadly defined as how the states can get things done. And it has 4 key pillars: autonomy, authority, management, and the availability of resources. And various indicators have been used to measure state capacity, to measure the concept that I just described earlier. And measure, for instance, include prevalence of crime, corruption, rule of law, the quality and the level of infrastructure, public goods, level, tax base, and type of taxation, macroeconomic management, structural intervention, and so on. My view about this measure is that it's too technocratic, it's too apolitical, and focused too much on resource allocation. So, as going to be clear in a minute, it's important to bring some normative principle into the way we define state capacity. Because it's not about getting things done. It's also about how are we getting things done. So, and state capacity is not just about how fast the bureaucrat can type. It's not about how, how educated we are. It also depends on agency cost. It depends on the degree of collective individual agency, because if things are being done properly, you can reduce the social cost. If things are not done improperly, if things are done not properly, then the reverse is possible. So, for instance, inclusive institutions may lead to higher state capacity than oppressive one because it reduces the social cost. A case can be made that at least per capita, Mauritius has higher state capacity than Russia. Because Mauritius have institutions that get people to be willing, to be capable of investing in progress, social economic progress in their country, while Russia, for instance, is oppressive. So you cannot completely ignore institutions, the nature of institutions, and a set of normative values that those institutions represent in the way you define state capacity. So, which take us to understand the role that politics play. For instance, in a country can have higher level of taxation, but then if the burden is on few people, targeted because they are not politically aligned, if you have a lot of discrimination, if you have preferential treatment of different groups based on race, based on their political affiliation, then de facto state capacity is weaker because of that. So what is critical for development and critical for this discussion on state capacity and development is to understand institutions that reward politicians and state actors for designing policies that generates misallocation. For instance, there is a paper by Jones and colleagues showing that there is a major productivity loss in the US, major misallocation of talent as a result of gender and social discrimination. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to explain what I mean by political distortion, and I'm going to use the knowledge that we have to think about how we can correct political distortion, strengthen state capacity by what I call institutional editing and institutional experimentation. By institutional editing and experimentation, I mean interventions that change the way decisions are made. That might take out the current way decisions are made and insert a new way to make decisions. And that editing and experimentation, for instance, can help promote political agency, can get people feel that they belong, empowered, to the point where they can actually make a better contribution to development. And there are three ways I'm going to illustrate this. One is deliberation, social contract, and political selection. Study that I've done in Benin to show how you can actually make a small adjustment of the existing institutions. The way election campaigns are run, the way bureaucracies are managed, even the way policies are made, and by injecting a sense of belonging, by injecting an idea of social contract to deliberation, you can actually improve development outcome. So, all right, to really understand what I mean by political distortion, you have to start by thinking that there is an ideal government behavior for development. There is a benevolent dictator, a social planner, who wants to minimize development outcome and social welfare institutions or outcome. And political distortion is the gap between politics as it ought to be and politics as it is. And this is very important to understand this gap, because you can understand the mechanism creating this, and you can find ways to correct it. So here are three examples of political distortion. Dictatorships is a political distortion. There is evidence that autocracies will really have good economic performance for more than a generation. And we can understand why. So that's about democracy versus dictatorship. But then, within democracies, for instance, you can have political distortion when firms are connected to politicians and get preferential taxation, get preferential regulation, and there is vast evidence showing that this leads to decline in innovation, whether it's in Italy, whether it's in Eastern Europe or Latin America. So the optimal institution or setting that will reduce this distortion and improve market competition is the idea of creative destruction by Schumpeter, showing that, for instance, When innovative firms are rewarded by higher market share until they are destroyed by another competition, by the competition, then you create dynamics for innovation. But then, as I said earlier, this can be destroyed by political connection, where some firms are protected because they are politically connected. So clientelism is also part of a problem. For instance, there is a paper on Kenya showing that the allocation of investment in roads is has ethnic favoritism. Like for instance, when you are a region that have, that co-ethnics with the president, for instance, they tend to have more investment. So, and in that paper, they show that one way, when the road networks is based on maximizing market access, and they show how this happened. For instance, they have these maps showing, for instance, the road network as it would be if it was to maximize market access, and the road network as it is. And the gap between the two is what is political distortion. So now, because of the existence of political distortion, and because this is, this is a major drag on state capacity, how can you think? Can we think about state capacity building? The literature is currently focused on technical expertise in public management of state actors. Like most of the papers talking about state capacity building, they focus on give money to these people, they can work harder, then problem solve. Or train them when they're technically well-trained and problem solve. No, in fact, that's not enough. Because as I said earlier, it's not about getting things done, it's about how things are get done, which is very important. So there is an emerging literature not focused on developing technical expertise or bureaucrats, but focused on what I call institutional experimentation as opposed to policy experimentation, aiming at reducing political distortion. So, okay, this is what I'm going to tell you in the next 3 minutes. It's something that I think it's critical for this debate. So first of all, let's talk about what is an institution. An institution, what I mean by institution, is just a game theory. It's about a process of decision making, and the process of decision making has players, have strategies, and the game structure will provide incentives for politicians or state actors to behave or not behave. Okay? So now, what is interesting and what I think is very important is the best way to actually make institution work is not just to understand what it is, and to understand how it works. It's about thinking carefully about how you can make a change to the existing institution, how you can edit the existing institution to solve the problems that arise from it. For instance, consider a very simple game where you want 2 players or more to contribute to maintaining a road, So in that game, so let me maybe give you, okay. In that game, this is the structure, is that there are two equilibria, one in which people actually together decide to maintain, and whether they do not, and as a result, the payoff is zero. So it's two equilibria, and one is good, one in which the road is maintained, one is bad, whether it's not, okay? Now, the question is, how do you get out of this? How do you get out of the fact that things can be good or bad? Well, you can just add a stage of the game, which is voting. Before people decide to maintain, get them to vote, whether they are for or against. So, and it makes no sense to vote for and then not to contribute to maintaining. It's irrational. So as a result, if you vote for, it's a commitment that you are going to vote, you are going to contribute. So adding that stage completely solved the problem of coordination. So we have an existing process of decision making. What we did, we just add a voting stage. And the problem generated by this game has been resolved. You know? So there was a coordination failure. Now it has been resolved simply by adding a stage where people make it, allowing people to commit. So, all right, so what is institutional experimentation? So once the game is edited, once we want to change the existing institution so that we can achieve where we want to be, what we want to do, now you need to show that it works. You need to show that this edit works, okay? So the question in this, the exercise there is to show, is to be able to measure the added value of this edited institution that I'm going to call institution one compared to status quo. So for instance, what you do is, I'm going to show the detail in a second, what you need to do is to select some places where you implement the edit. And then there are places where the status quo prevails. And then later on, you compare the outcome under the edit to the outcome of the status quo, and the gap between the two will be the added value of the institution. But then it's possible that the new institution works because it gives more information. You see, in the example that I gave earlier, voting gets people to understand the intention of the different players. So they feel confident that no one in his right mind will vote for and then end up not contributing. So that information might be what driving the result. You see what I mean? But then it's also possible that the institution empowers the individual because they know that it's a collective decision that was made. They feel like the outcome is something that depends on them, on their will, and as a result, they will be willing to make it work. So the mechanism can be one of information. It could also be the one of empowerment and agency. So I'm going to skip the technical details, but that's the point I wanted to make, which is that you can actually evaluate institutions the way you evaluate the policy, and there are ways in which you can measure the part of the result that's driven by people voting or deliberating, and as a result, you have better information, you can make more informed decisions, or something critical, which is agency and empowerment. There is a value for individuals or for communities to know that they have been listened to, that they matter, that what happened is not just something that imposed on them, something that's dropped on them, that it's something that comes from them, something that is, that depend on them, okay? So, all right. So there are historical examples of institutional experimentation that I find interesting. So I'm going to give two. One is one on chieftaincy in Zimbabwe. So basically, chiefs play an important role in Africa, particularly in Zimbabwe, Ghana, and other places. But it created a distortion because individuals that are connected to the chief, they are better protected. For instance, their land cannot be expropriated, and because they feel more secure, these people invest more in making the land fertile. There is a paper on that. So, two colleagues from Yale proposed an edit, which is have technocrats or train the counselors, the advisor of the chief, and they show that this edit to the existing chieftaincy leads to better outcome in Zimbabwe. And this is driven in part by a saying in Account that says that there are no bad kings, but there are just bad counselors. If you want to hold the hand of a king, just surround him with good people, well-trained, and then things are going to get better. Whether you agree or not, I think what is interesting about this exercise is that we are not saying that chieftaincies are bad or good. They are there to stay. They are part of our legacy. So, and we are not in a world where we can scrap, current government and replace it with chieftaincy. It's not possible. They have to live side by side. Then the question is, how do we make chieftaincy work better? Is there a mechanism that you can put in place to make chieftaincy work better? And they propose this one, and it works. Another really good illustration is market reform in China. I think this is clearly the most prominent experimentation and editing story ever. When Deng came to power in 1977, so what he did, the status quo institution was communism, with over-centralization, cult of personality, absence of market competition, and inequitable education system. So he edited, if you will, communism with focus on education reform that improve access. There are videos or pictures of, new education reform that allow, 40 people to sit with 18-year-old kids for an exam to get them into college, So improve access was key. We created free economic zone to experiment with, market competition at local level. He also have the Communist Party, particularly the Central Committee, to be more collegial, to have more kind of horizontal accountability, And the results, as we say, was spectacular, Will be, regardless what you think about Chinese today, 77-82, 77-84 was a revolutionary moment. And because somebody has the crazy idea to think that communism can be edited. Communism can be reformed on specific aspects. And what he did was he has mechanism to look at the result of any experimentation, any experiment that he put in place, has a mechanism for that. And if it works, then it scale up. It doesn't work very well, he adjusts. You adjust it. So I think it's something which is super interesting, and that makes the point very, very well. So now I'm going to now talk about my own work on this, which is more like field experiment. in line with a little bit like the Zimbabwe case. And I focus on experimentation with three concepts. The concept of public reason, which says that, well, any policy, any decision, you have to give an opportunity to engage with the public and to provide the reasons for the policy, okay? And then the idea of social contract, and more importantly, deliberation. Why deliberation? First of all, because deliberation is it's the essence of African political culture. I mean, this is something that we tend to underestimate, something that we don't take very seriously. As I'm going to show in a moment, we better really adopt deliberation as a guiding principle for politics, for public management in Africa. Why? Because of this. I don't know if you like this quote or not. So it's a proverb from Chewa in Malawi that says that if you are one, you are an animal. If you are two or more, then you are a person. It just shows to what extent social connections, the mutual dependence. I mean, the fact that we are mutually dependent on one another, the mutual independence is at the core of human mode of being. And this idea has led to the widespread notion of consensus democracy in traditional Africa, and it's all over, in Eastern Africa, Southern Africa, Nigeria. I'm not saying that it's in every community in Africa, but it's really widespread. And African political philosophers has really bring that out clearly in their work. So, and the way you make consensus democracy works is through deliberation. Like growing up, like I don't remember how many times, I have people spontaneously showing up at the central, as they say in French, abra palabre, the central space in village where we talk about everything. Somebody who misbehaved, there's a guy who, I'm not going to describe what he did, but in any case, what I remember is he was brought up, and then he was yelled at. He was the subject of several hours of discussion by the community. This is the way decisions are made, let alone building a school, let alone contributing to road maintenance, So it's very, very important. And so what is also important is the notion that deliberation helps alleviate conflict. It's not, the experience of deliberation across Africa, in Ghana, or in Zambia, and other places, is one in which there are distant positions that people have at the beginning, but then there is an effort to arrive to some consensus through, through deliberation, discussions, and so on. So, so one of the critiques that people makes on one of the prominent advocates of deliberation and consensus democracy is that it sounds too nostalgic. It's impractical. But what we are going to do here is not about taking a wholesale approach to deliberation. What is important is to insert the idea of deliberation, to put deliberation in existing democratic procedure to get the benefit of this, the benefit of this concept. So it fits very well what I mean by institutional editing. So I'm going to give three examples. One is deliberation in electoral campaign. So that's, I have done 3 projects in Benin on that. And then somebody said, well, you are, of course you can do this because, you are from Benin. You can just go to the politicians and then tell them, oh, let's deliberate, let me see how it works. So, yeah, go ahead. But then to challenge that, I went to the place that the farthest possible from Benin. That's Philippines. And I did the same thing there, and the result was similar. So those personal challenges are fantastic. And I was lucky to have a friend from Philippines that put me in touch with the local politicians. So the second one, which is actually very interesting as well, is deliberation with bureaucrats. Basically, what we did is we, we try to promote to deliberation some level of horizontal accountability. In a place where you have corrupt bureaucrats, where things are not working out, what happens if you get them to meet closed door? The mayor is not there, no politician is there, and then you don't know anything about what filter. It's very similar to what basketball players do, which is players only meeting, right? When there is when a basketball team is a mess, so sometimes we just close the locker room and yell at each other. Nobody knows what was said, and then what you realize afterwards is that you have a stronger group. I'm not showing there is any evidence on that, but this is the inspiration of this exercise. And then the third one is something we did, Education Summit, we run in Nigeria, where we insert in the existing decision-making process on education a deliberation procedure, where we have stakeholders, debating about priorities for nearly a day. And the governor was just, at best, a moderator, And then after that, we get the participant to sign a document, to sign a contract, so that they can feel responsible of what was said, what was promised. So those are the three exercises that I did that represent what I did. Okay, so the policy deliberation during the campaign deliberation was in 2011. We have the candidate running town hall meeting in some selected places, and then in other places they do rallies as usual. Okay, so and those are pictures. So you can see that, typically the candidate comes, he speaks for, typically he will talk for, an hour. Yell and kick, propaganda, no. Here, he comes, he talks for 15 minutes, max. And then he lets people speak for 2 hours. And then, not only people add to his platform, or they adjust the existing policy proposal. And what did we find? We find that it had higher effect on turnout and voting for the candidate, particularly for the opposition candidate. So what this simple exercise of deliberation did was actually to have people more informed. Because, okay, so it's nothing like the US campaign, very robotic, very, whatever. So I get all those emails everywhere saying, we are going to die, give me $4, this kind of stuff. No. So you have higher electoral participation. And then what is interesting here is also policy convergence. What is interesting is that when you ask questions to people after deliberation, they converge in their views. You see what I mean? Whether you are, male participant, female participant, when you have poor and rich people, this converges. So more importantly, people who participate to deliberation, they are greater willingness to reject vote buying. So for instance, giving money in expectation of vote, it happened a bit less in places where people have the opportunity to have meaningful discussions about the issues. You see what I mean? And then in this context, when you give money to voters, it's perceived as a sign that you are corrupt. You know? And so anyway, so that's one. Okay. The next exercise that we did was, okay, in a mafia-like bureaucracy, is it possible to get bureaucrats to hold themselves accountable? So this is what it is. What we did was, again, in some district, we did deliberation, as I described earlier. So we make sure that the deliberative process is the same in every location, because that's very important. You know, when you take deliberation, it's some type of deliberation. You know, it's like deliberation here means that step 1, this is what happened. Step 2, this is what happened. Step 3, this is what happened. And every location we do the same thing. You know, you cannot have a situation where in village A we deliberate for 3 days, and village B we deliberate for 3 hours. That's not comparable. You know, so we make sure that the structure is the same. So same structure, and then here is the story. So there is a central government agency that provides like audit report. Okay. Typically, when audit comes, it put in a corner by the mayor that does what he wants. So he can say, you know, you are my friend, I don't care what the audit report say, you stay. You are not my friend, you go. You know, the mayor has a lot of discretion in how you use the audit report. So what we did was we had 3 meetings. The first meeting, the representation of audit report. The second presented results from bureaucrats, you know, to understand how bureaucrats think of each other. And then survey of citizens, how citizens in the community think of bureaucrats. And then the meeting was staff only. You know, the mayor was not invited. You know, so all right. So this is the place where it happened. Those are some meetings. You know, we haven't darkened the picture on purpose. You know, just it's not like I give the instruction to my team, make sure that you don't know people who are participating, so make the picture darker. It's because we have bad phone, you know, so that's what it is. Anyway, so, but, okay, so this is what happened. And you see that, you know, first of all, things get better as a result. Okay, because 1 year after we did the work, things got significantly better. Okay? So it didn't have any short-run effect on service delivery. I mean, because it's such a short term, I mean, you cannot change things radically overnight. But at least the fact that the bureaucrats get the act together, you know, nearly a year after the meetings is a good sign. Now here is the catch. So, the meeting gets people to be very fearful of each other. You know, so it's not the case like before where meetings are good, people, you know, have positive energy, blah, blah, blah. No. Here, the meeting have good results in terms of bureaucratic performance, but have negative energy, you know. So, and this is similar to an exercise that was done in Italy, where they show that some information disclosure in Sicily broke, like it makes mafia go away because people have seen the ground shaking. They say, this is what we know today. What am I going to do? We are going to know tomorrow. So as a result, let's try to get our act together before it's too late. You know, I mean, that's one interpretation. So in terms of, but let's hope, and I think there is evidence that this is just short term, you know. So I'm not, okay, the level of coordination between bureaucrats decline, but it's for the better, you know. So, but anyway, so, okay, a la Deng Xiaoping, we can say, well, next time, is there a way we can tweak this so that we have the positive results on both accounts? That's possible. At least the most important, which is the improvement in outcome, is there, but then, but then we have this kind of decline. I hope that this decline is short term, but there might be a way to fix it, So anyway, now the last one is public deliberation education policy. So basically, what we did was as I said earlier, so we set up a process where education priorities are made this way. So first, we gather information about the state of school and education in the community. Second, we organize a summit, and people, one full day, deliberated over those education priorities. And then the third is they draft a social contract. Social contract is a very vague and extremely theoretical concept. But we want to make it concrete by getting people to just here. We discuss over one day about priorities. Let's have a document that captures the spirit of what we decided, and let's sign it. So this is what we did. Those are pictures, So it was during COVID. So I was, it's me from my living room in Princeton, and I made sure that that people see me as a Nigerian as well, because come on, who is this guy, who is directing traffic, so I find a way to go along that, my great grandfather is from Nigeria. So that's what I said at the beginning. I'm one of you. Yeah. Actually, if you know the name of my great grandfather, his name is a Nigerian last name. So I use it to my advantage. Anyway, so the meeting went super well. So this lady here represented the governor, So this is the text of the contract. And, and then after this, we get the governor to react to the social contract by having a work plan, and then the work plan, we take the work plan plus the results of the deliberation to schools, to communities, so that they take ownership of what has been said, okay? And then results, huge improvement in school infrastructure. Also an improvement in learning outcome, because learning losses in those places were smaller, okay? So, all right, so that's basically the story. Now, to finish, so let me just, I have this quote that I like a bit from Immanuel Kant, which in fact was my inspiration for this kind of work. Okay. He said the following. He said the formation of a state is not insoluble even for a race of devils, granted that they have intelligence. How to establish for them a constitution or an institution such that although their private disposition may be antagonistic, they may yet so act. His English, the translation from German was a bit problematic, but please, okay, bear with me. He may act so that as check on one another, so that in their public relations, the effect is the same as if they have no evil sentiments. This problem must be capable of a solution. So, so research shouldn't be about identifying devils and describe what they do. It should be about thinking how you create an environment, like, for instance, this policy deliberation, or what happened with those bureaucrats, so that given the environment they are in, they can act as if they don't have any evil sentiment. And I think this is a very important kind of approach to the study, to social science research, and to political economy. So basically, I see that institutional editing and experimentation can be a great way to get politicians to behave, and then to empower, to energize citizens so that they can take development as their thing, not something that is dropped on them, either from international community or from local politicians. And what is important is that this is actually part of African culture, So what the power of this exercise is to take existing elements of African culture to actually, for lack of better words, clean it up, operationalize it, and put it in current context with the hope that it can improve outcome. And you can show that the outcome is improved. If it's not, then you can go back to work and try to find a better way. And so this is the vision that I would like to develop on political economy and development, not only in Africa, but even in the US and other places, because I think that deliberation, search of consensus. I'm not saying that it's going to be the same everywhere, but I think this is something that can get us at least in a better place than we are. Thank you very much.
This thinking is still too bulky. We need to address interstate issues. See, for example, when I was in Florida, we set up a thing called Commonwealth Partnership on Technology Management, CPTM, and it was people from the Commonwealth coming together on issues for each state and planning going into those states and helping them achieve things that will give them value added.
Yeah.
So we got to get away from this balkanization thinking.
Yes.
That we live in a world where the information moves across, not just the community, the little townships, but worldwide. We're on a computer and all that stuff. So based on that, we need to have an institutional approach to inter and intra-state factors. I think this is too balkanized.
Yeah, no, okay. So here it's just a small test. Oh, sorry. So yeah, it's like a small exercise in it. When this will be scaled up, it can take the form that you are discussing. Okay, let me put it straight. Okay. Currently, we have local governments, and the one way to make local government work better is actually to involve citizens the way we did. Maybe next stage is, for instance, to put this exercise at regional level or national level. So, and then it will be more.
But I was just back to the last point.
Yeah.
When we were doing this thing, we had, maybe at the top, we had a group going into different countries, then what happened, when they was one, they found that he was from South Africa, thing fell apart.
Yeah.
So that's because it's not integrated up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like that. I said we've got to address the interstate. We had opportunities. Barcelona Association, small enterprise across the border between South Africa and Barcelona, address those institutional issues, and the small businesses on both sides profited from it. In front.
Yeah.
And I'll get to the last point. So I'm just saying, we got to get away from this balkanization thinking.
Yeah, but okay. So I agree with you. I think we need to scale up and we need to take this to national, to regional level. No, that's fine. But but okay, with this exercise, I can think better about how to do it. Because, okay, so what you are telling me, yeah, that's fine, looks great, but how do you do it? How does it work? How do you organize this deliberation? Who should pick first? Who should pick second? What kind of information should be provided? If you don't do this, the similar exercise, like in a lab, to understand the mechanism, to understand how it works, it's very difficult to scale up. You know, it's the same thing like in medicine, right? So before we take something to scale, we need to work in a lab, you know, to see how it works. The logic of it is no different, you know. So I agree with you entirely. But okay, let me put it this way. But I think it's super important to get this kind of ideas and legitimacy to say that this not only makes sense, you know, theoretically, empirically, because I have the data to show it, it's also grounded in the local political culture. You see what I mean? So, and it's important, but it's not something that's trivial to most people. It's not something that's obvious to most people. You know, I mean, okay, this is one example, but maybe there might be all other forms of editing that we can think of. Yeah. Yes. So I'll shut up and get all the questions. Yeah.
Okay, so first, thank you very much for the lecture. I really enjoyed it. I want to follow up with sort of a challenge to Kant's challenge that was posed by a German writer a few centuries later. Carl Schmitt, in his essay, The Concept of Political, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, and Schmitt defines politics as basically defining enemies. The whole point of politics is to find enemies, and that's what unifies things. One could argue that a lot of that has been going on recently. Doesn't that pose a challenge to this emphasis on deliberation? Isn't there always going to be a tendency to want to proceed in deliberation by proceeding by defining enemies?
Yeah. So, all right. I'm not, African philosophers, Kwasi Wiredu in particular, has responded to this and say that that's exactly the problem with democracy is too westernized, where it's all about exactly that. Who is the enemy? And am I going to, which side am I on? And he said that democracy is great, but for us to be the power for the people, of the people, and what else? I forgot. I'm sorry? Yeah, exactly. For us to do that, deliberation is necessary. So, and then you have the parameters and say, okay, can we start with 10% kind of agreement on something? Can we work things out? So I think, okay, what Kant is saying is that make social science research more problem solving. You know, don't tell us that, don't give me names of evils, you know, and say that's who they are, that's what they do. Tell me, can we think creatively about an environment where they can be controlled? Okay? And then, and I like that. I like this kind of prospective, this kind of prescriptive view of research, particularly political science research. You know, I like that. But then again, I'm saying that what Africa can contribute to the world is the idea that in any decision making, you can always inject a degree of deliberation, a degree of, you do that more often than not, outcome can improve. You know, so then it's up to researchers, for instance, to design the best way to do it so that we can achieve whatever goal we want to achieve. You know, like in many of the exercises that I did in Benin, so when I try to convince politicians to come to do this kind of deliberative exercise, I tell them exactly, say, we are in the same boat. There is no enemy here, whatever. So if I want to help this, before the meeting, I can bring a dance club and music, and we dance, we have fun. People just they relax, and then they come to the table to talk. You see what I mean? So, and I think it's really powerful. It's really powerful. And I'm not going to say it's uniquely African, but I think it's something that we need to learn from, something that we can design better, so that, you know, this kind of adversarial views of democratic politics may be limited. You know, and I mean, Fishkin, in his work, Fishkin from Stanford, he said the same thing. He said that in the US, for instance, when you do deliberation, Democrat and Republican, they are different at the end than they were at the beginning. You know, so he forgot to say, well, this is African. But anyway, that's a separate story. You know, so so the point, that's the point I wanted to make. So Kant, I like Kant here because he said, let's solve problems. Let's not describe how bad things are. You know, and then second, I agree with you that democratic politics can be too adversarial. That's exactly why the African culture of deliberation can come in some dose, in some ways, to be able to get people to come down and to find a common ground.
Hi, I'm Jessica Gordon-Nemhard. Thanks. I really like your contribution of African culture to liberation and consensus building, but I wonder if you could talk more about the role of community agency.
Yes.
It's like there's a larger role beyond the councils of advisors.
Yeah. That's super interesting. You know, I think, okay, the bigger point here is that, let me put it this way. Another layer of this is deliberation towards community agency. You know, it's not let's just talk and be better informed. Let's talk and know that this is what we have to do. This is what, you know, you see what I mean? So it's only recently that I start reading this literature. It's super rich. You know, Kwesi Wirebu and others, African philosophers have looked at this. Many of them are very historical. They describe how these things work. So maybe with time, I will learn more how people try to do what you just said, which is how do they manage to convey that this is not in our hands, you know? And I think the more I think about it, the more I realize that there is so much agency deficit. You know, people, for better or worse, think that the solution is elsewhere. You know, the solution will come from elsewhere and fall on them, you know. And I think we need to resolve this issue, and you know, and I think, you know, this deliberation, information, and putting processes for people to understand, like for instance, the social contract exercise. It looks bogus, you know, it's like, what is this, you know? But then, because the governor didn't sign up for it, he doesn't have to, he's excluded. So people who came to the meeting, they know that this is our contract, this is what we need to do. You know, so, you know, we have to keep thinking. So for me, it's just a direction. You know, we need to sort of create a movement, I should say, for democracy in Africa to be edited along the line of our political culture. You hear a lot of that, you know, democracy is not part of our culture. No, that's not true. Democracy is part of our culture. We are, you know, I mean, you cannot be more democratic than this. You know, I mean, I'm exaggerating. But, you know, see the point I'm making. But the form is different from elsewhere. Elsewhere is more adversarial. In Africa, or many African contexts, is more consensus building approach. How do we bring both together, you know? So.
Thanks, Leonard, for an excellent presentation. I want you to, again, I think the African culture is a nice way to set the discussion here. I want to ask you to bring in some of the work you have done on bringing in history.
Yes.
And initial, two particular things, initial conditions and interest groups.
Yeah.
What I mean by initial conditions is if you are in an environment where things are good. Everybody's excited about the economy and so on.
Yeah.
I think people will have a more incentive to sit down and deliberate on how to improve their well-being.
Yeah.
But in a situation where you have things that are going really bad,
Yeah.
you have two problems. One is generalized pessimism among the population.
Yeah.
The other is that the ones who are benefiting from the crisis and the war and so on are going to have disincentive in participating in the deliberation. So how do you motivate people to come to the group, to the exercise, when some are actually not interested in changing, whereas others have given up?
No, this is great. This is great. Okay, so I have two answers. Well, first of all, on the history part, I'm a contributor to this literature on history, and incidentally, I wrote a paper showing that slave trade, have a negative impact on trust in Africa. Okay, so and this could be read as super pessimistic, that the history weighs so heavily on Africa today and so on. But then what people maybe forget to add is that if you look at the statistics, slave trades account for anywhere from 15 to 25%, or 16 to 25% with variation in trust. So there is still 85% that is not about history. You see what I mean? So, so what I'm saying is that when we talk about history mattering for current outcome, we always need to add, well, it's up to this level. There is much, much, much more that can be done. Like in the context of Africa, yes, there was slavery, and yet there was independent movement where intellectuals from different regions of a given country, basically, well, different country and also different regions got together to set up Pan-Africanist movements, and you have nationalists, and this made it possible, for instance, for African countries to become independent. So history is important, but it doesn't explain everything. That's one. On this thing, what you describe look very much like my bureaucrats. Things are bad. I mean, like pretty bad. But then we lock them up and say, yell at each other all you want, hold each other accountable. You see what I mean? So when things are bad, you might adapt the technology so that you can get people to tell the truth to each other, to hold each other accountable, and this can help improve outcome. You see what I mean? I'm not saying that this is the only way, but again, à la Kant, let's find a solution. Let's think of, okay, when you have what you describe, when you have this, what should you do? What should you not do? I think it's very, very important. And something that also works very well is incentives. The reason why these bureaucrats get their act together, you know what? Because, there is a provision that says that if governance index improve, the budget will increase by 20%. So they say, well, we have our skin in the game here, we need to get things to get better so that we can be rewarded, So again, I don't have a ready-made answer for this question, but then that's exactly the kind of exercise we should be engaging in, so that we can come up with something. If it doesn't work, a la Deng Xiaoping, we say, well, let's adjust it this way, let's adjust it that way, so that, and so on. My uncle said something which is quite deep. This guy he not even have first grade. But then one day he told me that change is either incremental or it's death. You see what I mean? If I will come to you that whole change, revolution is possible, no, that's not true. Most of changes happen incrementally, the way I'm describing, So even on the worst kind of situation, it's not about thinking of, we are evil everywhere, let's just get rid of them, or let's do this. No, it's to think that there might be a way to bring those bad guys in. It might be a way to entice them, and bring this in. Like Deng Xiaoping, as I keep saying, he didn't round up all the Communist Party leaders, put people who were radical communists, and shoot them. He didn't do that. He set up a system so that you behave, you have a future. You don't behave, you are gone. So, and I think this is the mindset. I think it will be super useful, to be creative in way we can actually, on a wide range of conditions, we can make step-by-step incremental changes. Leverage the good against the bad, or, I think words matter, so maybe there might be a way to craft some messages that get people to understand, that for their own preservation, we need to do things better. Anyway, so I'm just making it up, but I think we just have to have this kind of optimism that things can work incrementally, but can work. And then think about what has worked and adapt, and think of new things that we can put in place, and so on and so forth. Yeah, fantastic question. Thank you. Yeah.
I like what you say about personal agency being deficient in terms of the individual's economic freedom within the nation. Zimbabwe is very low on that. And so I think while I like what you have with the smaller groups and getting better outcomes,
Yeah.
I think those better outcomes might be limited depending on the other larger institutional arrangements within the country.
Yes.
So the money supply, for instance, is awful, of course, in Zimbabwe. Rule of law, other aspects that will empower individuals to make these local governments more successful. Without having some of the other infrastructure in place, it seems like it might be limited. Like Botswana has been very successful at implementing those things, with similar resource base and whatnot. And I was wondering if you kind of comment on that on other institutions.
Yeah, no, this is great. So the challenge is scaling up. How do you bring this up to scale in regionally, nationally? I can say modestly, I'm not there yet. We're not there yet, but I think this is. I agree with you. This is the challenge. This is the challenge, and but again, you give the example of Zimbabwe. One of my concern is that in Africa today, people seem a bit at loss about politics. I even hear people say, "Oh, democracy is the reason why we have all this." Democracy is too costly. We need strongmen. We need this. You don't understand. You absolutely don't understand what it is. We tried that before. In the 60s and 70s, we have quite a few of them. This is part of the reason why we are where we are today. So, and I think we shouldn't really underestimate, how local politics can be a good start to get things better nationally, and we shouldn't underestimate the role of ideas. Because. This exercise is not, it doesn't solve all the problems, but it actually gets us a way to think of creative way to solve the problems, and the opportunities are always there, always. Opportunity can come because, one day Zimbabwe will be a different state. Somebody or something will happen with an opportunity to make things better. When that time comes, are we ready? Are we ready with the right set of ideas? You see what I mean? So, and I think, to think about the Zimbabwe that you are talking about. Maybe that may happen in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. We need to start developing ideas and models now, so that when the opportunity comes, we have keys to unlock the potential, the economic, political potential of Zimbabwe. You see what I mean? So, of course, we want things to change right away, but we need to be happy if some local changes are possible, are working. We also need to develop a body of knowledge that help us when the opportunity comes to be ready, you know. So I'm sorry to be going back to Deng, but you know, I mean, I don't have a lot of examples, but I'm pretty sure that this guy, maybe he started thinking about data reform 20 years or 30 years before, but then he waited for a while. This old guy died in 1976, and he said, this is the time. You know, he has, in 2 years, 3 years, he implemented everything that he had in mind for a long, long time, you know. So it just shows that, you know, the ideas and strategies, it's something that in themselves are very, very important. And this is what we are trying to do. Yeah. Yeah, please.
Hi, thank you very much for the excellent speech. I had two questions.
Yeah.
One is very small regarding the voting stage that you talked about.
Yes.
Is that an anonymous vote or an invisible vote? That is the first question. The second is, how crucial is it that these institutional experimentation processes are proposed by local? You referred to the, for example, when you said you worked in Kenya, and you stressed that you were one of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Because why?
In Nigeria.
Nigeria.
No, not that far. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Tell me.
The reason I'm asking is
Yeah.
that the ownership of such processes is key to the wider development process, right? And the Doing Development Differently movement thinks about doing these kind of experimentations, but my skepticism is, as long as an external person comes to propose even to be doing the experimentation, I think the effect is different than if the proposal comes from the local.
Yeah, no, I mean, on the second point, I actually agree, you know, but obviously, everyone else in this picture is Nigerian, you know, I mean, so everybody is Nigerian. So, yeah, so basically, I think I agree with you entirely, but at the same time, there should be a balance, you know, because you cannot say nothing is going to work unless people come to a conclusion on their own, you know. You see what I mean? Like the idea of deliberation, the idea of, you know, I mean, you can read it from articles written by a Ghanaian or an article written by an American anthropologist, and this is your inspiration to do what you want to do. So I agree with you entirely that you need to make sure there is local ownership in the research agenda itself, you know, and I think it is very, very important. You cannot, the better you do that, the more likely you are going to have to improve outcome. And also for the outcome, you have to be sustainable. So I agree with you entirely. So again, I don't have a ready-made ways to do it all the time. You know, I came up with came up with this idea that, you know, whatever, you know, I said that, but yeah, if not, doesn't work, I'm a bit creative, you know. If it doesn't work, I can find another way to do it. I will wear agbada, you know, show up, you know. Or I will start dancing Nigerian music. So yeah, it's wonderful. In fact, it helped that several times people look at me closely and says, I'm Igbo, you know. I'm not sure if I'm Nigerian in this room, but when I go to the airport, they ask me, you know, where are you from? From Benin? No. You are Igbo. You are Igbo. You look Igbo to me, you know. And I say, yeah, of course, yeah, that's okay. So, so I'm saying you can find a way. I agree with the principle. Now, I think the game, if it's sequential or simultaneous move, the result is the same. Because, the point here is that it's about commitment. Regardless what the other is doing, if you vote for the first stage, it's stupid not to contribute in the second stage. You have to, because the outcome is higher, and the other guy thinks the same way, So I don't think it matters whether it's simultaneous or sequential, But the bigger point we wanted to make here is that coordination failure shouldn't be the end of it, It's about how do we modify the game so that coordination is solved. So that's basically the power of editing the game. People who wrote these papers on this game in the past, they didn't call it editing. They just say modifying games so that you can improve outcome. But I use this kind of metaphor to show that we need to understand the existing institutions. We need to know them properly. We need to find out what are the areas of dysfunction, why things are not working, and then say, let me take this out and bring this in, or let me add this at the beginning or at the end, and there are a lot of possibilities. Like, for instance, if you have a game where you want to improve outcome on gender, because the outcome is captured by men. So you can say, okay, if we have deliberation, for instance, will women speak first or last? You see what I mean? So what is the threshold of women vote if we decide to vote? That will impose on everyone else. You said you can do this kind of exercise to make sure that a dysfunctional outcome that you observe can be achieved. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I had a question.
Antonio, and then look,
Yeah.
Go on.
I've been struggling with an issue that is really existential, and that is adapting to climate change. And I'm working with a group that is thinking of what you described, institutional editing.
Yeah.
But the major challenge is not necessarily within one level of institution.
Yeah.
It's the local and the national, and sometimes something in between.
Yeah.
It's the responsibilities may have that work from the past will not take us to the future.
Yeah.
And so one thing that we're struggling with is, first of all, we see deliberations, especially at the local level, as critical.
Yeah.
But how do you sequence and structure
Yeah.
the deliberations?
Yeah.
You have to have the federal and
Yeah.
the local together so that everyone sees the big problem. You do the local first, the national first. How, or is each problem different? That is the struggle, because no one has done it right.
Yeah.
And where there have been floods, people are
Yeah.
So we want to know, how do you speed up the process? How do you have the ideas in place so that if there is ever a loss and damage fund, we can really use it?
Yeah. So okay. All right. Again, to come back to what I said earlier. So it's not about is this or this. It could well be that, okay, let's take the climate change issue. How are decisions made? Is it too much international, too much national, not enough local? Is it not enough science, not enough science communication. So we look at what exists and identify what the problems are. And then you can say, well, now let's have a higher dose of national, because let's have a higher dose of science, because let's have a higher dose of, because at the end of the day, the locals will contribute a lot to what's happening. So let me give you the example of my home country, Benin. So, I mean, like, half of the place has huge agricultural potential. You go to any place in Benin, you are 20 kilometers from a major river. You know, it's God given. But the worst cases of poverty happen in those places. People who are even living in Sahel are not as poor as people living there. Yes. So then the solution, for instance, would be to boost agricultural production or climate change or whatever in those places. You see what I mean? By taking advantage of the fact that you have diversity on the ground. You see what I mean? But this is not the decision that should come to the US. That's the decision that local governments should make. So they know the place is much better. You know, so you can have the international kind of process. You need the local, you need the national, and each with some degree of agency. You see what I mean? So the problem for me is when somebody comes from Germany and say, yeah, climate change here, whatever, you know, you're all hungry, you know. So you have to ask people questions. You know, what is the place where the opportunities are? What is the place where the challenges are? Is there a way you can use resources from place A to solve the problem in place B? You know, so you have to give people a voice. You know, like, for instance, if you listen to many of the speeches on climate change today, someone the other day, you know, I connect with, they were here, you need to catch people from San Francisco, and a lot of money in helicopter, distribute to people in Sahel, who want to go to a better place, because misery, you know, climate change, getting people hungry, nobody have a future, nobody have blah, blah, blah. Let's give money to those people. So, because they don't, it's so simplistic to think that the solution to climate change is just redistribution of resources. No, they haven't done it, you did it here, so you should pay for it. So simplistic, you know, I mean, I would love if there is money towards climate change. I would love if this can be used to build a bridge in my hometown so that agricultural production can be boosted. And as a result, production of corn can be shipped to the place where they are facing climate change. Not where you get tax money and distribute, you know? So it comes down to understanding how things are working and think creatively about how things can be improved. And make sure that local government have a stake, national government have a stake. You see what scientists have a stake. You see what I mean? And you know, because you can even think that the process of tackling climate change maybe might be too centralized, too Eurocentric. You know, because they don't think that anybody in those countries can think clearly, that they have the solution. They can just tell people what to do. You know, so I'm not saying this is all there is, but this could be part of the problem. So what I'm saying here can be a way to move the needle on this. Get people agency, get people voice, have a better understanding of trade-off at local level. And you know, and even then, you know, if there is funding available, it can be better used. As opposed to thinking that the only solution is just distribute money to people to feed the hungry, you know. Yeah, thank you.
So, Leonard, if you don't mind, as a small token of our
Oh my God!
very large appreciation, we have this plaque for you, and it reads, the Sir W. Arthur Lewis Memorial Lecture Award from the National Economic Association to Professor Leonard Wantchekon, recognized as a scholar with diverse interests and has made substantive contributions and methodological contributions to the fields of political economy, economic history, and development economics. San Antonio, Texas, Saturday, January 6th. 5th? Sorry. Friday, January 6th, 2024.
Thank you,
So,
thank you,
yes.
thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Take a picture.
exactly, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. So before everyone leaves the room, I just want to remind you we still have a full day of additional paper sessions, right? We have some this afternoon, some tomorrow. Also, we have tomorrow the Bill Spriggs and Rodney Andrews Memorial Luncheon. So if you have not purchased your tickets for that, make sure you do that at Eventbrite. If you're unable to find it, it's on our Twitter page, it's on the LinkedIn page. Just reach out to me or Hazel or Nzenga if you need information on that. Again, we want to thank you for joining us this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you throughout today as well as tomorrow and Sunday morning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.